All right, everyone, welcome to we're just kind of doing something new here. We're gonna be doing like daily, no, actually weekly talks where we just get on and kind of talk about investing and finances, kind of get some backgrounds of us. So we'll be here on this HouseQue channel weekly. So we're kind of ironing out the format. So just be patient with us. It may be a little rough. But I'll just give a little bit of background about myself, and then I'll let Joe and I'll let Jareen go ahead and just talk a little bit about them. And then we're going to talk about primarily net worth today and what it means to us. So, name is Lewis Pike, of course, up here on the screen, as you see. Got a background primarily in digital marketing and technology consultant is primarily where I spend the most of my time these days, somewhat in operations, but really got kind of serious about finances. I've always had an interest in numbers and money, but really got serious with it about 4 years ago in 2017, where I really started taking a look at my money and getting my finances straight and taking care of my debt. Ended up paying off like 80K in like a year. And ever since then, I've been, interested in investing and just getting my net worth from, it was negative like 80,000 at the time. So my goal at that point is just get it to zero and then get it to where I'm at now, which has grown quite a bit. So that's a little bit of background about me. I'll let Jareen or Joe go next. Introduce yourselves.
Joe, take it away.
Sure. I was actually hoping not to follow up a really good
Went on
introduction
through you
because
the alley oop real quick.
I feel way less interesting going after Mr. Pike. But I'm Joseph King. I write software, and I've been trying to craft and hone that skill for, oh Lord, like 8 years now, 9 years, somewhere in that range. Professionally, I think 8. Financially, I feel like my goal is really just to be less financially irresponsible daily. And I'm maybe trying to get on that other side where I'm at least responsible and trying to grow it that way. It really probably picked up actually when I got shortly before I got married. My wife really helped me see how, kind of diligently I was spending my money and things like that. And then more recently, actually, Jareen got me interested in the real estate investing. So that's been another thing that's really kind of helped be a catalyst towards really learning what net worth is and then furthermore growing it. And Jareen, if you want to close us out.
Yeah, man. So I'm Jareen. I am probably a little bit of a hybrid, right? Like I've been in the corporate world for the last 10, 11 years. And throughout that journey, I've been really like trying to explore what it means to both like be a great employee, but then also think like an entrepreneur outside of that work environment. And whether that's like actually investing in things or just reading up on things, learning things, understanding things, that's the journey I've been on, is just to try to like figure out what net worth is, what people are doing to earn and to grow money and to invest money. And so I've been on that path. But by profession, I'm like a finance professional. I don't know what you really call it because finance is so broad, but I stick primarily in corporate finance, budgeting, forecasting, analysis for big corporations. And then also in personal finance, just kind of trying to talk to people along the way and give them whatever knowledge I've picked up on from books and web podcasts and things like that. So yeah, that's pretty much me in a nutshell. And yeah, I just love it. So let's go.
Awesome. Thank you guys. Both of those guys have been very, very humble. They could probably elaborate a lot more on their accomplishments and careers and how they got started, but it's probably another episode where we can deep dive into that. If you guys are interested, but let's jump into it. So today we're going to talk about just net worth is going to be a primary topic. And I guess we can kick it off with everyone going around, just kind of talk about what net worth means to them.
Jareen, do you want to start this?
Yeah, I mean, it's a couple of things, right? Like for me, net worth is almost a twofold topic. You got like paper net worth, which is when you go to the bank and they look at all of your assets and all of your liabilities, and they say, because of how much you own on paper and because of how much you owe on paper, the difference of that is your net worth. And that's like the banking terms of net worth. But then from a real perspective, I consider net worth like your financial well-being. And that could be way different than like what things look like on paper, right? Like I don't count cars or like golf clubs as part of net worth,
Yes.
even though they count from a financial standpoint, right? So I look at net worth as how healthy are your finances, um, and do you have anything that you could pass down to future generations? That's what I consider net worth.
Yeah, I like that, being able to pass it down to future generations. I think that is one of the main reasons why I guess I started looking into net worth. And elaborate what Jareen talked about. Net worth to me definitely just means, of course, all of your assets and stuff, where you can track it, that holds value, whether it be property, whether it be stocks, whether it be cash, whether it be vehicles that you have. I mean, there's also things where you can track net worth too. You know, if you're into collecting like watches and like shoes and stuff like that, you can factor those type of items into your net worth. But overall, I mean, the net worth to me is just that number where you can use to gauge like how healthy you are financially. And it may not just necessarily be the liquid cash that you have on you, but um, if you ever got in a bind or needed to cash out other assets, it's good to always include those in, and you can use those as part of your net worth. So um, just starting when I figured that out and started figuring out what it really meant to me, those are kind of like the items that stood out the most.
Nice.
That's awesome. It's interesting. So like kind of I think what you mentioned, Dream, where you think of net worth as passing down. So I
Hmm.
think of almost like three different pillars because I think early on it used to think about like you'd hear riches and like rich and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
I think rich is kind of more tied directly to net worth, like more concretely. But you're right. There's like a piece of net worth or like a certain portion of net worth that's attributed more to wealth, which to me feels more generational, feels more like money that just really, how am I trying to put this? Something that buys you time. Where
Yeah.
if you're still working for this money or you're trading time for value, that to me feels more like in the rich area.
Mm-hmm.
But
Hmm.
if your time is still generating income that's wealth to me.
Yeah.
So with that distinction, that's kind of how the evolution of my understanding of net worth or like my chase for net worth was.
Hmm.
And to talk about like how far this has kind of come, I don't know if you remember the quote that Cameron or my sister said. I don't know, somebody asked about my savings or something like that. And I was like, I don't need no savings. I'll earn more money. So
Yep.
that's
I
kind of
remember that.
so
That's a great way to live, Joe.
yeah, that was it.
That was a classic Joe quote.
So paycheck to paycheck, just is
Yeah.
like, you know what? I'll get a raise. I'll get a job. Just pay whatever. So it really had a
Yeah.
very much even worse than riches. It was just whatever. And I remember
Yeah.
like I forgot what the first thing I was applying for, where I had to list out things that were net worth, and I knew I had a problem when I was looking and like, I wonder how much that umbrella is worth. Just really trying to nickel down.
So,
Yeah,
so
you
you
were
were
getting
looking
very
for the golf
detailed.
clubs, huh?
Yeah.
You were trying to count that.
Oh, it was already there. So, when you're going and adding stuff like, all right, does bread count for this week? That's when you're at
Oh
that,
man.
you're really stretching for net worth. But now I'd really try to focus on those things that are going to appreciate over time.
Yeah.
And, some of them like dividends or like rental income and things like that are furthermore going to give you a little bit of cash flow as they appreciate. So that's kind of the type of net worth that I'm at least focused on now.
Nice.
Nice.
What
Nice.
when did you guys like start learning about net worth, or like when was the first time like you actually like checked your net worth? Like to see
Ooh.
what it is. I'll kick this one off. I mentioned earlier when I started like paying off my debt, but I looked at net worth before that. And honestly, like with net worth for me, the only time I saw net worth was when someone talked about with celebrities, like, oh, this person is
Hmm.
worth this much. And like, I honestly didn't have any clue. I was just like, when I first heard it the first time, I was like, oh, I mean, that's how much money they have on them or like cash they have in the bank. That's what I thought
That's what I
initially.
used to think.
Yeah, until like I actually like dived in and actually understood what net worth that was. I would probably say honestly, until like I started getting serious about my finances and finally started making some decent money. I would probably say
Hmm.
around like, 2012, 2013, where I was making like 50K a year. And I was like, okay, I'm making some money and I'm actually saving some money. I started looking at my net worth. I think I opened up a mint.com account and added in all my debts and stuff. And it's like, this is your net worth. And I was like, whoa, I am negative 100K plus. And I was like,
Ooh.
yeah, this is not great. So then I went a few years without even looking at net worth because, yeah, looking at a negative number each day can definitely take an effect on you. But that is kind of a roundabout way of how I started looking at net worth.
Mm.
When I finally set up a mint.com account. And that was my introduction to it.
Man, that's it's funny because I had such a similar experience about like understanding what net worth meant because you saw that number floating around or that
Mhm.
that word, and I really just thought that that's how much money they had in the bank too. Like I
Yep.
didn't understand that that was all of these, physical assets along with like, you know, any types of like trademarks and things that could be valued at something like that was a
Exactly.
foreign concept to me. So yeah, it was probably around, man, I don't even remember the year, but I was like 25 maybe.
Yeah.
And I started like trying to work on personal development. So it was the book Rich Dad Poor Dad for me, man. Like I read that book and
Nice.
I probably learned more in that one book than I did at least in the last year or two of business school. Like it was crazy how much information I had never heard or was never phrased in a way that I could understand it.
I
And
don't
so,
recall them ever even talking about net worth in school. Maybe I wasn't paying
no,
attention, but I don't recall personal finance or net worth even being discussed.
I was a finance major to put it into perspective. And I didn't hear it. So if it was taught in schools, I would hope it would be taught in the finance classes, but they didn't teach me.
Yeah,
So
my mass communications degree, they definitely wasn't talking about finance.
I
gotcha.
went there, so I was asleep when class was going on. So I don't know.
Joe just showed up for tests, so he definitely wasn't learning about it.
Man, that's
I
and
can't
that's the
comment.
thing. It's so wild. But yeah, so when I started to learn about it, it was really the concept of if you sold everything you had and you took all the money in the bank and you just put it in a pot, how long could you live without working again? And that is when it clicked for me.
Yes.
It was like oversimplification of take all the extra noise out. If you sold everything you own right now, how long could you survive without working another day?
What
And go ahead.
what was that number when you first looked at it, Jareen? Like when you
Ah,
first actually
man,
checked
I,
your net
I
worth?
was I was already starving. I couldn't. I, I was negative, so student loans, credit card debt, everything, man. I was probably in the same hole you were in, if not worse, potentially.
You were on that mission to get to zero net worth.
Man, I'm just trying to get to
Yeah.
zero. Yeah. Joe, what about you, man?
Ooh. What's funny is I think we all had the same understanding of net worth, where it was just like, you know what, this is literally how much somebody looks, they log in a Bank of America and they're like, oh, I have $25 million or I have 25 billion, whatever it was. That's
Hmm.
how I thought it worked. Didn't really know that it was in different assets or classes or, liabilities that people use debt, I was always taught that, debt's a bad thing in general.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
having a credit card's bad, having all this stuff is bad. So, I was just like, okay, I have bank accounts, this or that. Kind of had the impression that stocks and investment, it just seemed like a rich thing, like, or something that wasn't approachable. I don't know. I just had this in my mind that it was just something that wasn't for me, at least at that time. I'm not sure. I can't think of like a flash in the pan moment where all this changed. I think it was a combination of some stuff that that each of you spoke about. Like during your reading these books and going through those type of things were things similar to me. And I should preface by saying I listened to the books because it's definitely
well, I listened to it. I didn't read it. I didn't read the books. I should state that also.
So it's definitely Audible. I could credit Audible for a lot of information from a lot of people about self-development and things like that.
Same
and then
here.
again, got to give nice. And I got to give credit to Nikita for helping me realize, like, you know what, this trying to earn more isn't necessarily going to get you. So these books were kind of planting some seeds, and then eventually it kind of converged into something where it's like, you know what, let's try to build net worth.
Joe, were you negative when you first started tracking your net worth?
So my negative was very self-inflicted. So,
Gotcha.
I was blessed with UCA where since mom taught there, we got a significant amount of the tuition covered. So I didn't really have student debt. Most everybody's negative is student debt. I don't really have any. So
that's awesome.
I was negative because I let that little bit outstand, and I would have, like a credit card here or there, different things like that where I just had nothing to show, nothing tangible to show for my money. My car is depreciating daily. That bread's going to expire in 2 days. That umbrella is only worth $3. So the combination of all that, I was definitely negative with you. And it's, considering how shallowly negative I was, it's probably embarrassing how recent it was that I started to go past zero.
The paycheck to paycheck life.
Yeah, man. And it's there's such a lack of information of like just how this is supposed to work, right? Like I had a pretty similar like undergrad experience. Like luckily I didn't have to pay for undergrad because of scholarships and stuff. And so I was like, should have been debt free when I got out of undergrad. And I know we talked about this before. I was taking out loans just so I could get money when other people were getting their refund checks, and I was going and spending the money on clothes and shoes and like stupid stuff. So I probably racked up 5 to 10 grand worth of student loan debt when I didn't have school fees to pay for. That lets you know, like, that understanding of what is net worth meant nothing to me back then. It was like I'm putting myself in an unnecessary hole.
Well, I definitely, when Joe mentioned, it was kind of, self-inflicted or not really paying attention, like mine was self-inflicted as well. It was just like similar to Jareen's, just crazy. I was taking out way more student loans than I needed to in order to get by. Like, it was ridiculous. Like the amount I took out was not needed. So definitely some stupid tats in there that cost a lot, especially in interest. I guess that brings us to the next question. What are some strategies or some things you did to help grow your net worth?
Strategies.
Go
ahead, Joe.
Go ahead, Joe. Kick this one off.
Yeah.
I think it feels like the first one is just to like kind of getting an understanding of just like your basic financial health, because I think before you even start getting to really trying to approach net worth, you need to understand like, okay, how's my overall financial health? Am I spending more than I'm earning,
Yep.
that type of thing. Is there anything that I can do to scrape down the bottom line? Is there anything that I can do to increase my income? How can you get that spread going? So once you get that portion and kind of understand where your money is going, there's another piece that is a whole nother topic, is, to really understand how to utilize credit. So, money makes money. So once you learn how to utilize credit,
Mm-hmm.
you can start to utilize some other strategies to really catapult your
Ye-
net worth. So
Yeah.
like for me specifically, it was about kind of getting past that where I was so financially irresponsible. So getting to that point to really paying off really the severely negative debt. So anything with dang near predatory interest rates, like
Mm-hmm.
those have got to go.
mhm.
So cut those first. And then from there, it's looking to say, and this is actually another topic, to get past that understanding of like savings is just putting money in a bank account. So to
Yeah.
understand like, oh, you haven't been contributing to your 401k, dummy. So,
Mm-hmm.
starting to contribute there to realize, you may not touch that, but that is actually considered net worth and it's going to grow.
Yeah.
There are sometimes other stock plans that you can contribute to and work. So kind of chipping away at those things where I don't even see it because,
Yeah.
especially as you're building those habits, if it hits my bank account, it's spendable. Um,
Yep.
so getting those things and then kind of eventually working into other, once you've got a solid cash reserve, you can then start to look into possibly buying real estate, or you could just
Mm-hmm.
with a much smaller reserve buy stocks, or if you're a little bit more risky, crypto or something like that. But
Yep.
Yep.
that's
Yep.
kind of the
Yeah.
strategy.
I like that you mentioned, starting with like taking a look at like how healthy your finances are, like before you even get focused on net worth. Like, how are you financially fit? Like, how are you spending money? How are you saving money? Where can you cut
Mm-hmm.
money? I think those are really important to touch on. But I think for me, is like where I got started was, I think when I actually like looked at my net worth, I think from there it was like, what are the big things that are really keeping me from having a positive net worth? Like,
Mm-hmm.
my debt is killed. These student loans are terrible. This credit card debt is terrible. I got a card that I'm paying too much for that I don't need, that is over where I need to be, considering I don't have barely any money saved up and I got all this debt. So I think the big thing for me was like, how do I get this debt paid off first? And
Yeah.
then, because I'm paying a bunch of interest in it, I got this debt that's killing my net worth. How can I get this paid off and start getting um start attributing my cash to stuff that's helping my net worth grow, like investing in a 401k, investing in a Roth IRA, investing in individual stocks or crypto or real estate. How can I start putting money into things that are going to grow? They're going to make my money grow for me. That's
Mm-hmm.
really going to help my net worth grow really fast, not just saving money in the bank account. It was important for me to get out of the negative and get to zero. That's why I set that first goal. But once I reached there, it was like, how do I grow my net worth? And just by putting in items that's going to grow over time, or assets that's going to
Mm-hmm.
grow, not assets that's going to depreciate over time. So I think that was the biggest step for me that I, implemented. First, get my debt paid off, and then just flipping my mind to how I can start using my money to work for me. Those are the biggest two
Mm-hmm.
things for me with getting my net worth to grow.
Gotcha. And see, those are all really good, right? Like, I think for me, it was so from a big picture perspective, it was all of that, where you understand your financial position, you understand your spending behaviors, but even with that level of understanding and even seeing it on paper, the the real strategy behind me growing my net worth was probably the most practical thing I could do, which was just protecting myself from myself. Like, I literally put stuff on autopilot so I couldn't be who I was, because me being who I was back then was keeping me from growing my net worth.
Yeah.
So it really didn't take effect until I literally put as much on like direct withdrawal or um you know autopilot as possible. And when I did that, it was like, okay, as soon as my paycheck comes in, this much instantly goes to savings, and this much instantly goes to the bank account that's set up
Yes.
just to pay bills, and this much instantly goes to whatever account is just for debt pay down, and this much, if there's any left, goes to fun, but that has to be a smaller amount than in the past. And I think the biggest thing was, and I read this in a lot of those books, was no matter where I was or no matter what I felt like I owed to other people, I had to start carving out a portion that was just going to go towards my savings and my investment and treat it like a bill and
Oh
just make
yeah.
that on autopilot.
I
And like
could
I think that was the biggest thing that helped me start to grow mine.
Yeah, I can definitely attest to that. Like that, having that plan in place, whether you do it at the beginning of the month or in the month, as soon as that money comes in, send it where it needs to go. And like being
Mhm.
serious about it and making it a priority. This is what I'm saving this month. This is what I'm investing this month. This is what I'm paying for debt each month. Having that prioritized, because you can say you're going to do it, but if you don't put a plan in place to do it, it is very hard to do it. Because now I'm the same way. I don't even think about it. I know every month, no matter how much I bring in, I got a certain percentage going to these different categories that's going to help me grow my net worth. It may be small some months, it may be a big chunk some months, but I know over
Mhm.
time, each year I go back and look at my net worth growth, like, man, like it multiplies and builds up over time. So those are
Yep.
definitely some good points.
I think
Go
there's
ahead.
one more a book that I thought was pretty good with a lot of this piece, especially the early portions. And I forgot. I feel like it was one of you who recommended it. It was "I'll Teach You to Be Rich."
Yes.
Yep.
Yep.
I remember
I
that
re-
Yeah,
book. Yeah.
Ramid.
that,
Yeah. I
yep.
definitely, that's the one I recommended.
Mm, that was a good one.
Excellent book.
Yeah.
Excellent book, especially touching on a lot of these the early foundational portions that we're speaking about.
Yeah. That's a really good book. It's definitely, if you're, millennials like us, that he definitely relates to you, speaks our language. So yeah, that was
Hmm.
definitely a good book that got me interested. What
Yeah.
I guess that brings us to the next question, is this is probably the toughest one we got today, I think. Um why do you think net worth is so disproportionate among different cultures, and what we can do to kind of close those gaps?
Mm, that's the $1 million question.
I'll kick it off. I'll just give my input, and I think we can bounce back and forth on this one. I mean, I think the main reason is just, I can, speaking for the Black culture or the African American culture, is just lack of knowledge. Like no one talks about it. Like I can speak for, the generations, my parents and the grandparents or generations before. Like nobody really talked about money. And
Hmm.
the I was, when I grew up, and I've talked about this in the past, like it was, you get money, you spend it. That's what you can afford. So however
Yeah.
much your paycheck is every month, every week, or whatever, that's what you can afford, and you go up to the max. I mean, like you can have a $500, this is Arkansas, so it's going to be some low rates or early, so you can have a $500 $600 rent bill and have a $700 $800 car note, which is crazy
Yep.
now that I think about it, but
Yep.
that's the way it is. And people work, you know 40 hours and got a part-time job working 20 hours somewhere and barely making minimum wage, two jobs just to do that. But you're car poor, like, and it's material poor, and
Yep.
it's just lack of
Yeah.
education. And I don't think, I really think, wish I would have learned and knew about this stuff when I was younger, even when I started working jobs in high school. Like, again, I started out that way. It was just, you get a paycheck, you spend it all. There was nothing about saving, investing in stocks, didn't have a clue about
Mhm.
anything of investing. So I think the big thing is just education, and look at it like on the other side. My partner, Melissa, she's white and Chinese, but like her dynamic of money and stuff is a lot different from mine, because um, you know, her parents have properties that they invest in here in the Bay Area. Her grandparents had properties that they passed down to
Mhm.
her parents. So it's just a big thing of generational wealth. So if we're starting out and looking at net worth, like before if we're starting out, before we even start, like she has a huge advantage just off what she's going to inherit as with me, like I'm like that first in my family to like it starts with me to make it right to start building
Yeah.
up and turning the tide so my kids and stuff can have generational wealth that I can pass down. So I think that's one of the issues is just education. And I think another one is like a lot of people I know from where I'm from is like they're barely making ends meet. So like I don't think they
Mhm.
have even the time to even, you know, function to think about like building up net worth. It's like how am I gonna put food on the table? How am I gonna pay the bills? Like I think the disparity in like income too, because it's hard to get out of that mindset if you're making a low wage. I'm not, it's possible, but it's definitely
Mhm.
makes it a lot harder. I can say definitely been blessed to be able to make a pretty good income to be able to get to the point where I'm able to grow a net worth, even though I started kind of late. I wish I'd have started way in my 20s instead of starting in my early 30s, really getting focused on it. But I think that plays a big part too, is just having the ability education and then just having the income and resources to be able to help build your net worth.
Yeah. Really, really good, insightful answers. Um, I I think about this a lot because it's definitely not all based on income because I think especially as as a as a community, right? Like if I'm just talking about the Black community,
It's definitely some behavior in there too.
it's
Definitely.
behavior because we're making a lot more. And when I say we, I understand that everyone collectively isn't, but as a whole, we're way more educated than we've ever been in terms of like institutional education. We've got, much higher paying jobs than a lot of our predecessors had, but the behavior does align a lot with what you talked about with the knowledge base, right? And so even when I think about the fact that like financial literacy is growing in our community, for the most part, it's still one or two people within each family that might know about these topics or in depth about these topics, right?
Hmm.
So you have to go find other people in your peer group to talk to about these, but they're still not dinner table conversations.
Oh no, not at
Like
all. Yeah.
I can't go to my family reunion and just start talking about a real estate investment deal. And that I think is limiting to some degree,
Hmm.
and so the information is starting to get spread more and more, and I think that that's a great trend. But because of the fact that historically we haven't had as many assets um, passed down because we weren't allowed to own them in the first place, so
Exactly.
so that part kept a lot of people from learning how to build and how to manage and how to grow an asset base. But at this point in time, like I try not to look back in the past in a sense because like it doesn't really help me going forward. So I acknowledge that, and I acknowledge that that's part of the deficiency that we've been working to get out of. But I think a bigger part of the reason why there's such a gap now is because the information isn't readily available within the households, but even the information that's available online is in direct conflict with the messaging that most people receive. Like if you look online or if you look in your favorite TV shows, like very seldom are the messages about good financial practices. It is more you get money, you blow money, you spend it on a flashy lifestyle. And with like this Instagram culture, it's like I keeping up with the Joneses is a worldwide phenomenon now. So it's not even like you're competing with the people in your neighborhood. You're spending all of your money to look wealthy to people across the world online that you may not know. So I think when we peel back the layers, at a young age, the more information and the more practices that we can start instilling in people will really help them develop into more financially sound individuals. But that's what I think the gap is. I think it's a mixture of the education not being in our communities and the messaging that we receive, which I think impacts us so much more because we've got historically a smaller pot to work with. So if we're
Hmm.
spending this money to be flashy, and if our culture is a culture that likes to be flashy, right, wrong, or indifferent, that's where our resources are going to go. And
True.
I think that's a big part of the issue.
Yeah. No, I agree. I mean, touch on that too is like, I I think a lot of us too, like you struggle growing up. So when you finally do get some money, some decent money coming in, you kind of want to
Hmm.
ball out a little bit too. So it's definitely tough to be like, oh, let me do the right thing since I went
Man,
so long without being able to.
I
I
did it
want to be a
all,
little
boy.
reckless for a bit. So it's I definitely get that.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it's very true. It's interesting you brought up a point, and I'm not necessarily sure how much this has to do, but I'm curious y'all's thoughts on it, like with different cultures or whatnot. But I feel like one thing that can definitely impact people in general, as far as like chasing wealth and maybe how much this happens in different cultures, I'm not really sure, to be honest. Um,
Hmm.
but it's almost human nature to want more. So no matter how much you're making or where you are, and I think both of you kind of touched on this, when you make more, you may have been
Hmm.
surviving just fine on what you had before, but it's
Hmm.
in your nature to be like, you know what? I had a PlayStation 4. Now I can afford a PlayStation 5.
Yep,
Boom.
Exactly.
There's $500
yep,
spent. You know, okay, now I can get a new set of pans. Oh, I can finally get the $200 set. Oh, I can upgrade all this stuff. And Jareen, you were talking about some of the things in the culture and you know how much that impacts people. But you know, think about things like jewelry
yeah,
that has no cap. You know, if you want to have better or nicer jewelry or things like that than other people, and to your point, Lewis, keeping up with the Joneses,
Hmm.
um, you've got all these things where you're keeping up and then out, and you're never going to grow your net worth. You may be making $1 million a year. You can easily spend $1 million a year if you're trying to keep up with
yeah,
people
Yep.
in those type of races. So, like I said, I'm not really sure how much that has to do with different cultures. I'm sure all cultures deal with this, maybe some to more degrees than others. But one thing that I feel like is is kind of important, um, and I think representation may be more important than I realize. And I think of it from uh, just sometimes you see it, you see other people doing it, you see
hmm,
people, and sometimes you can kind of identify with some people a little bit more than others. And when you see that, it kind of gives you, it stretches your mind. You know,
yeah,
like I feel like as a kid, I had a very different North Star because I had, you know, a certain group of people around me or whatever. And it was like, okay, my North Star, but it can change once you
Hmm.
kind of see a broader
hmm,
horizon. You start to see people going further. And especially as you get close to them and you kind of demystify some of that, you're like,
yeah,
oh, that's not that complicated. You know,
hmm,
it's not as hard as it seems. And I think there's a big bell of mystery around a lot of this stuff. There's a big bell
yes,
of mystery around investing. There's a big bell of mystery around net worth. And I believe both of you touched on this, if I'm not mistaken, but there also is a factor of all this information's out there. And there are people who really look like everyone presenting this information. And
yeah,
so it's also a choice of, you know, there are some people who are probably working two jobs, have kids, and you know, literally have no time. And that time they have, they probably want to disconnect. Definitely understandable. But there are people on the flip side where it's like, hey, you have 8, 9, 10 hours of free time a day. If
hmm,
you spent 2 hours of this investing in yourself and learning and trying to elevate and step up, and understood that a lot of these people you might be looking at, you know, I think you mentioned some of the examples and stuff where people are, you know, you look at videos or things of, you know, people celebrating championships and stuff.
Yep.
You don't see the videos of their practice. You don't see them in the
exactly,
studio. You don't see the hours and hours of relentless work, and that's where it's at. And so it's kind of one of those things where it's like, don't focus so much, but you need to fall in love with the process
Yep.
to get
I
there.
agree.
And
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
those type of things would really help, you know, even the playing field, because I feel like regardless of where you start, it's about where you finish.
Yeah, Joe, you said something really impactful to me. You mentioned the word representation, and I think that that's huge, because human nature is like you fear what you don't understand, right? And even when I think about my journey, I was curious about real estate. I was reading about real estate, but because I personally wasn't connected or close to anyone who looked like me, thought like me, acted like me, who was investing in real estate, it still felt like some far off concept. And so, like, I think this is probably a topic for another day about how I got started in real estate. But the reason why I was comfortable to get started was because a black guy in a barber shop was talking about his real estate investments.
Mm-hmm.
And that made me see myself doing it
Yep.
versus listening to someone that I couldn't relate to at a base level talk about it. It sounded like a great concept, but because our backgrounds were so different, I didn't have that trust factor going in. And so I think one of the big drivers behind so many more people even having these conversations are like platforms like Earn Your Leisure and all of these new forms of media where people who look like us, who like hip hop music, who are deeply rooted in our culture, are having these conversations, and it normalizes it. I
Yep.
think that's a really big factor.
I absolutely agree. I think that's some good stuff we touched on, fellas. I think that brings us to wrapping it up. But before we wrap it up, I have one more question I want us to kind of touch on. Since we talked a lot about net worth and what we've done to improve our net worth, what one piece of advice you would give to your 21-year-old self now, knowing what you know now about net worth? What piece of advice would you give your 21-year-old self?
Oh, this is easy. This is real easy. Hey, Joe, take about $200, invest in some Bitcoin, and play
Man.
Guitar Hero. Be the best you could ever be.
Yep.
Do nothing. Skip school. Don't do anything. You'll be a billionaire in a couple of years. Don't worry
Yep.
about it.
Very easy.
That's it. That's all you need.
when I saw this question, I wrote down 3 things. I wrote Apple, Google,
Man,
Amazon.
those are only 3. 3-headed monster.
That's it. Every Little Caesars paycheck you get, Apple, Google,
Oh,
Amazon.
my
You know
gosh.
what? Take those student loans that you was borrowing. Apple, Google, Amazon.
Yeah.
There
Yeah.
you go. And you'd be good. You'd be good. It'll pay itself off. Don't even worry about it.
That's it, man. Y'all took all the real ones, all the real answers. So my advice, and I almost feel like this should be a completely separate episode, because we could probably go real in depth on like step by step stuff. But like my real advice would just be, man, just read a book. Like listen to a book on
That's
Audible,
true.
bro. Like
Yep.
everything stems from like just that one step of being curious and learning some stuff you don't know that's not like taught in school. That would be my thing. Hey man, you're 21, open up an Audible account and just listen to one book a month, and
Yep.
everything else you'll figure out along the way.
Exactly. No, I think that's a good one.
That's excellent.
Well, cool,
I gave-
fellas. Go ahead, Joe.
Oh yeah. Let's wrap up. I was gonna give a real one, not the.
Hey,
that was a real one. What
mine
you
was
mean?
a real one.
That's true.
I feel like we should have an episode on just that though. Like if
Yeah.
you were gonna map out a strategy for like a younger person, what would that look like? That'd be a dope episode.
I definitely think that'd be a good topic to touch on. Well, thank you, fellas, for hopping on. Like I said, we're gonna try to hop on these weekly and just have different topics that we're gonna talk to. We'll be working on getting the format a little bit ironed out, but mostly it's just gonna be us on here just talking. We have these calls all the time amongst each other. So we figured we might as well just share, and we love talking about finances and how we can improve our finances and grow our net worth. So real estate, stocks, Bitcoin, we talk about it all. So we'll definitely be coming back. So if you guys like, go ahead and subscribe, follow the channel, leave some comments below. If there's some topics and stuff that you want us to touch on, leave those below. If you guys want to get in touch with us too, I'll drop our social media handles in the description. You can definitely get in contact with us. We're open books. We love to talk to anyone. If you want to learn more, talk to us, hit us up. We'd definitely be welcome to share or interested in sharing any information we can to help out and giving back out. If you have career advice about how we got in our different career paths, I'd definitely be willing to share that. No Jareen, no Joe be willing to share that as well. So again,
Yeah.
thank you guys for hopping on, and we'll see everyone next week. Have a good one.
All right. See you guys.
Peace.
Thanks.